to show support for those who have lost loved ones over the last year or so. But as I say, we want to say thank you to everybody who has helped out in Jersey since this all kicked off. One of those who this time last year was thrown right into the centre of lockdown planning was Malcolm Ferry from Citizens Advice. Morning to you, Malcolm. So you were asked to step aside from the day job and take on a new role. Remind us what that was and what that kind of period of time was like for you.
Yeah, morning, Ashley. It was, exactly this time last year. I got a call from the government over the weekend to say, could I come in and help with some planning? And when I went down to Broad Street, to my surprise, the plans were quite advanced, which was comforting in a lot of ways. But, during those early times, there was, a certain amount of trepidation and to be fair, a certain amount of panic from lots of people in all walks of life. But, in many ways, that was good panic, because I think people realised that this wasn't something that was going to go away quickly. We weren't exactly sure how this whole situation was going to unfold. But what we had from a very early stage is loads of offers of support, loads of really good examples of community working together with civil servants, with faith groups, with philanthropists, with private business. My phone was just constantly ringing night and day with offers of support, so much so, in fact, that it was overwhelming. And we knew that going forwards, we would need this support as it unfolded, but people wanted to do something, and they wanted to do something now. And it was just placing all of those people into the right slots as much as we could. And those offers came from all walks of life.
And in that was why it was sort of necessary to have a coordinator, because so many people were putting their hands up to say, I'll help, I just don't know how. Exactly.
And also, amongst those great offers of help, there was offers of money. There was offers of resources. There was, company directors and the big utilities were saying, how can we make sure this time is going to be okay for vulnerable people? And what I found was, I would ask for something to be done which would normally take weeks or even months, and it was happening within days. So what it showed to me is, all those barriers, all those traditional barriers, they just fell because people realised the importance of what we were all facing. And people just slotted themselves into jobs, even if it was for a couple of days. And without embarrassing you, Ashley, you were one of those people who helped us out at a really important time. And even if that's just for a day or two, that really makes a big difference to every organisation. It's that old story, if thousands of people give a little, that is better than one or two people giving a lot.
Yeah, I remember hassling you actually and saying, Malcolm, come on, I was supposed to be off work this week and this is all kicking off and they're not letting me back on because they're saying this is going to be, you're going to be talking about this for a long time, so you need to have some downtime. And I couldn't just sit on my hands. So yeah, spent a day at Citizens Advice and, actually loved working alongside the team. So thank you for having me. One of the first things that you did was work with the Salvation Army on a food bank, didn't you? So why was that seen as one of the most important things?
What came out of our initial stages of Brexit planning was, the scenario that kind of unfolded a few months earlier than we thought with coronavirus. So we knew that, food banks in Jersey, unfortunately, have been shown an increase even before the pandemic. But we knew that the great work that all the food banks did is very often staffed by people who were needing to shield or needed to stay at home themselves. So the food bank was centralised through the great people at Salvation Army who really stepped into the breach at an important time. But they were supported by all the other providers as well. But we wanted to have a centralised place. We wanted good facilities. We wanted to be able to have the ability to get food out to people, because all the things that food banks traditionally did just suddenly didn't make any sense anymore. So you couldn't have queues of people, waiting to get food. You needed to reverse that process, and they were absolutely brilliant at making that work. So food banks was the most important thing because it's the most basic in life, isn't it? If you've got food and you've got shelter, everything else can build upon that.
And how many people offered to help over that, first few months? I remember there being loads, like thousands, right?
Literally thousands. I mean, one of the, what kind of came out from this is all the solutions to the problems that we were trying to find were already at our fingertips. They were already there. So the best example of that is a website called volunteer.je. Had been ticking along for a number of years, had 500 people who wanted to volunteer through that sort of electronic method. Now, there's 3,500 people on that site now, and they are still actively being engaged and used. So I think what we're seeing from the whole outcome of the pandemic is, in many ways, it's a blueprint for the way we're going to live in the future. Whilst no one wants things to go back to what we ever called normal in 2019, we are going to be able to take lots of good things from what's happened over the last year and apply them to the way that we live in the future.
And what would you say to everybody who put their hands up and said, I want to help?
I would say a massive thank you to everyone who's helped in any way, no matter how big or how small. I know that we sort of, the media like to focus on certain individuals who have really gone that extra mile. But do you know what? As a community, virtually everyone has helped in a different way, whether that be large or whether that be small. So we all owe each other a debt of gratitude. I'm grateful for how far we've come in the last year, and we've got the blessing of vaccinations, which is definitely going to make a big difference, because I was reading a scientific paper about this time a year ago, which was called The Hammer and the Dance, and it was talking about squashing the virus and then dancing in and out of lockdown for the next, X number of years. And it was saying at the time that, 18 months before a vaccine is found would be a miracle. And if I could spin this forward to where we are now, I've already had my first jab. I know lots of people who have had both. We would take that. We would take where we are now if I could go back this time last year. It has been a tumultuous year, but we've all learnt loads, and we know that we've got a way out of this. And we've also got the opportunity to learn and use what we've learned to build a better society.
One thing I would say is, speaking to people who have gone the extra mile, they tend not to want to come on the radio or talk about it on the telly because they're those sorts of people. As you mentioned, we're not completely there yet, are we? We're not totally out of the woods, but we are in a good place. What do you hope for the rest of the year?
We've still got challenges. Let's be honest. There's still people that are struggling to find employment, although that number is slowly reducing. There's still the threat of job losses. But I think people are getting more intelligent about what they do. I think people are getting more intelligent about the way they live. I think the expectations of society as a whole have to be readjusted and reset. And I think that we're starting to see that. So I think we've got a bright future. I think as an island, we've been fantastic at the way we've responded. And long may that continue into the future, because it's far from going away.
And we've got this silence at midday today. Will you be observing it?
Yeah, definitely. It's an important time to reflect, because don't forget, throughout all this, the loss of life has been globally has been horrendous, and it's important that although we've learned lots of good things, we do remember people that have not made it through this time, and people who have lost loved ones. So it's important that we reflect and pause and just consider how far we've come.
Thank you so much for your time. Always a real pleasure to speak to you. That's Malcolm Ferry there. This time last year, he was asked to be the Volunteer Hub coordinator for the Community Task Force as Jersey went into its first lockdown. And thousands of people in the island who found themselves with a bit of extra time on their hands offered their help. And he was part of the sort of crack team, if you like, that put people together,